With lots of you guys doing mega endurance races this autumn, we're going to explore how you can get the most out of these bad boys come race day. A lot of the knowledge that I gained from my own marathon was from a guy called Jamie. He's one of the nutritionists and works specifically on gut health for the New Balance team in Manchester. I mean, Johnny Miller seemed to do alright for himself, didn't he? Ended up running in the Commonwealth Games. I'll leave a video down in the description of him talking so you can learn a bit more after this video. But why listen to me? What are the advantages of getting your nutrition right come race day? Well, a study found there was about a 2 to 3% difference in performance over a given distance, i.e. a runner with the potential to run a 3-hour marathon getting their nutrition run would end up running 3:05. 4-hour marathon suddenly becomes a 4:07. Can you afford to lose those minutes? So what about their physiology? In a test done on a sub 2:10 marathon runner, they recorded the rate of fat and carb metabolism at any given pace. During a warm-up, 6-minute miling and 5-minute miling. 5-minute miling being his marathon pace. Let's get sketching and I'll show you a graph. As you can see, the shift in fat metabolism barely moves, but the amount of carb usage rapidly increases. Now, there is a slight difference in women. Women metabolize fat and carbs differently to men. They're not just small men. At slower speeds, women are able to metabolize fat with a far greater rate than carbs than men. However, as they slowly up towards marathon pace, we see that there is still a large increase in the amount of carbs being used, and the fat actually starts to dip. Logically, one may argue that we can just improve the fat metabolism, so we need to use less carbs. But there's a few flaws with this. First thing being that all we would do is we'd be shifting the graph to the left slightly, so we can actually increase our top end marathon speed, given we get our carbs right. It is true we would need less carbs at a given pace, but then that given pace would literally just be running a suboptimal marathon. What would be the point in that? Also, fat is a far less efficient fuel than carbohydrate. The more you're using fat over carbs, the higher your VO2 max output for a given speed. Therefore, for that given speed, you're putting in more effort. One may also argue that we can just save using the carbs come race day and not have to practice with them during our long runs. There is another flaw to this. Yes, it seems like you'd suddenly be getting the max benefit from a race having not practiced on the carbs, as you've trained on only fats and shifted the graph to the left. But I'll explain why that is actually not a great idea. But how much do we need? Regardless of size, an untrained person will absorb around 60 grams of carbohydrate per hour, given that the carbohydrate is from a single source, like maltodextrin or fructose. If you start to mix those two together and get a blend, that 60 grams can suddenly be up towards 80 grams. For reference, that gel I threw away earlier is going to have around 20 grams in. Kipchoge, when he did his sub-breaking 2 attempts, consumed between 90 to 110 grams per hour. Think of it this way, he had between 5 and 6 gels every hour. And for those of you who are wondering how many gels that is overall, that's 10 gels. That might seem a lot just to consume with gels. There are other gel options other than the ones that are talk, like Morton. Morton's the one that Kipchoge used, and the reason he uses that one is because it's double concentrate, and that's up towards 40 grams, so you're halving the amount of gels you need. There are also a few different sources that runners tend to go for. Others are carb drinks, or a few people like to eat foods, like jelly babies or caramel waffles. The important thing is to try and get these from simple carbohydrates, i.e. they have a high glycemic index and can be used readily from the body. Can you overdo it and go overboard with a carbohydrate? In a study of untrained athletes, the 90 grams given to them during a study, body took on between 60 and 70, but a lot of them struggle to actually stomach that amount. With training using fluid and gels, your stomach can actually start to get used to it. This is known as gut training, which is why I said earlier it is actually important to practice in long runs. The more you're practicing with that carbohydrate source, the better your body gets at using it. So not only are you taking on more, you're actually using it more efficiently. For example, talking about Johnny Miller again, after regular training, he managed to up his absorption from 79.8 grams, which is already quite high, 86.4. So the best thing to do is slightly overdo it. As long as your gut can take it, there is no issues of having too much on board, but there is a massive downside of not having enough. The important thing is the practice and training. So the question now becomes, how do I practice and when do I practice? From a lot of studies done, basically the earlier the better. So I'd say start your training with just 1 or 2 gels right early on in the block, maybe just in your long runs, so once a week. You can start to learn which flavors work for you, which type of gels work, because there's way more than one and there's a lot on the market. It's really worth having a play and see what works for you. As I've also said, your gut gets used to having gels in. If you're sick on gels, as Tom Cragg said, it's because you don't deserve to take them because you haven't practiced enough. It's also important to slightly up your carbohydrate eating during your day-to-day. Upping it during your day-to-day means you're taking on more carbohydrate, so your body gets used to using it. Running is a 24-hour sport. We say it's a lifestyle. and that really is. So you've done the early stages of the block and you're now into the last 6 to 3 weeks. This is where it's definitely worth upping your intake and using it a lot more. Start to build towards your race plan. Start to use gels twice a week rather than once, definitely during those marathon specific sessions, i.e. the big long runs. Maybe even chuck it in if you're doing a midweek long or a big session midweek. And at least one day during the block, I recommend doing a full practice. So
Sorry. Right, going inside.
And on one day during the block, I recommend doing a full practice for the last 48 hours leading up to the race. So practicing your dinners, practicing your breakfast, practicing your lunch, leave nothing to surprise. And then on the actual run itself, taking the nutrition and the fluid as you would during the race. As I have heard before, there are a lot of people who struggle with foreign marathons. Food over there is slightly different. For example, America, the food is a lot richer. So when they have dinner over there, it doesn't quite sit with them right. And then come race day, they do have a few issues. Now looking beyond just the scope of nutrition and talking about electrolytes, I've heard before that people confuse electrolytes as a source of fuel. Having a bit of sodium in your gels or drink is necessary, and that's going to be all the electrolytes you need really, but it is important to have them. Not only does it prevent cramping due to the loss of salt, but salt also helps with the absorption of carbohydrate. The video I'm talking about that Jamie did in the description below is really worth a watch. How many things can you actually say that are going to knock 2 to 3% off your marathon time? That is worth way more than any specific session you'll ever do, and the video itself is only about 20 minutes. If you have any more questions or insights yourself, leave them in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. And as ever, please like the video and do subscribe. It will make my day. And you know what? I'll see you in the next one.